Welcome everyone to this afternoon's session, Clean Water Isn't Free, Communicating About Rates. Next. As you can see on the slide before you, many of you will have opportunities for CEU or PDHs. Instructions for obtaining these will be emailed to you after the webcast. If you have any questions, you should address them to Matt Jones at the email address shown. Next. Attendees of this webcast have an opportunity to purchase these two books shown before you at 20% off, and when you check out, you use the promo code RATEWEB, and you have several ways you can order, so you should take advantage of this great opportunity. Next. I am Betty Jordan with Allen Plummer Associates, and I serve as the chair of the Webcast Subcommittee for Public Communications and Outreach Committee, also known as PCOC for short. The PCOC is very pleased to present this session to you today. Our topic is particularly relevant in light of our country's economic climate and our industry's growing need to both reinvest in our aging infrastructure and invest in cutting-edge technologies that make us leaner and greener. We may also need to be a little meaner in getting money out of people to pay for what they're getting. What can you do to win the public and your local officials over to this cause? Surely water is critical to sustaining our quality of life, but how can you better convey that message to your stakeholders? How do you get people to invest in the quality of life, public health, and environmental health? We can live without cell phones and cable TV, although I know some teenagers who would argue that statement, but we can't live without water. How do we get people to pay for water and wastewater services at levels at least commensurate with the luxuries such as mobile phones and cable TV? Not even at levels commensurate with the fact that their lives depend on it. Our goal today is that by the end of this webcast, you have some great and creative ideas about answering that question, or the question, how do you convince people that water's worth it, worth the investment? As this webcast continues, please use the feature in your control panel to submit questions. We will collect those and allow time for the presenters to respond at the end of the session. Next. Our first speaker today is Sarah Katz, the founder and president of Katz & Associates, a full-service communications firm with offices in San Diego, Fort Worth, Las Vegas, Madison, Nashville, Orange County, Sacramento, San Francisco, and Seattle. So no matter where you are close to Katz & Associates. Sarah founded Katz & Associates in 1986 after 10 years with former California Governor Pete Wilson and San Diego Mayor Susan Golding. With her team of communication professionals, Sarah manages community relations, public involvement, and public affairs strategies for her clients. In the area of water resources, Sarah has provided strategic counsel and ongoing implementation support for numerous programs and agencies in the San Diego County Water Authority, the Southern Nevada Water Authority, the City of San Diego's $2 billion clean water program, the San Antonio Water System, the City of Houston for their combined sewer overflow program, El Paso Water Utilities, the Aurora, Colorado's Prairie Waters program, and the City of San Diego's Water Reuse and Non-Potable Water Studies, the City of San Francisco's Public Utilities Commission $4.6 billion water supply improvement program. A talented and frequent conference speaker and published writer, Sarah is a member of AWWA, ACWA, WEF, and Water Reuse. She is the past chair of the AWWA Public Involvement Committee. She earned a Bachelor of Science degree in economics with a minor in political science from San Diego State University. She has completed coursework in facilitation and public involvement process negotiations. Join me in welcoming Sarah. Next.
Thank you, Betty. I appreciate that. A brief review of today's agenda. We will be looking at, in generalities, the public view of rate increases, offering some communication tips to advance rate increases, talking about the importance of and the need for communicating the value of water, the whole water cycle, ideas on how to change the conversation, reshape the dialogue, and offering some lessons learned. Next. I think it's fair to say that not many people stand in front of a dais from a public body and say, great, the rates are going up. The water industry specifically has been faced with a real challenge these last few years in that we have collectively advanced sustainability and conservation as a way that you, the ratepayer, can control your rising water and wastewater rates. And heeding that response and that call, many people have done that for a variety of reasons, whether it actually is their commitment to environmental sustainability or, in fact, a simple way of trying to save expenses on a monthly basis. What's happening now is that as they have reduced their consumption, they continue to see their rates going up, and that is very demoralizing and frustrating. The fact is the public attitudes towards government at most levels has really soured, and our confidence has eroded. It seems like all levels of government continue to ask for more money. Some blame it on public employee salaries or pension increases. Others continue to say that there's just waste and bureaucracy. Other folks just recognize that costs are going up and they're just tapped out when it comes to their ability and or desire to pay for more. Next, please. We've been involved in several research projects of recent, including last week at a major city in Northern California that's looking at raising their rates significantly to pay for a multi-billion-dollar wastewater improvement program. One of the questions we heard throughout those sessions, and I've heard in many jurisdictions, is what are you doing with the money we already give you? I'm cutting back, I'm being environmentally sustainable, I'm using rain barrels to capture my water, I'm gathering water in my shower to save both on water and wastewater expenses, and yet my rates continue to go up. One of the challenges we face, especially on the wastewater side, is that what we do in large measure is hidden. It's below ground. People flush their toilets, they take a shower, and that's about as much time and energy as they give to wastewater. It magically goes away and they don't need to think about it again until they receive their bill. Individuals can connect with other requests that they are getting, again, at local, state, and federal levels, whether it's we need to invest in our schools because I have a school-age child and I go to the local school, that your police substation may have to shut down due to lack of financial resources. That impacts me. I'm concerned about my family's safety. Even with water, the challenge is a bit easier because we can show both if water needs to be transported, where water is stored, how water gets used. But with wastewater, the challenge is greater. It's hidden. Questions that we have continued to receive across jurisdictions is that what you're proposing, are these things we have to do? Is it being mandated? Is it a law? Is it a consent decree? Or are these just nice to have that the engineers and or policymakers would like to see advanced? Next slide, please. So thinking about a rate increase is really a very strategic approach. Reaching out to your ratepayers about the purpose and need for an increase in rates should not be the first thing that they have heard in quite some time from you. This really needs to be a part of the continuum of dialogue and education and engagement and input that you conduct frequently with your ratepayers. We are strong advocates for research. I wouldn't ask an engineer to design a treatment plant without a pre-design. I wouldn't ask an engineer to build a pipeline without preliminary engineering. I don't think it's fair to ask communications practitioners and or board members to approve rate increases until we have really researched and understood community values and get a snapshot of where people are as it relates to the value of water and wastewater, your agency, and the things that are just top of mind for them. Once you have that research with an appreciation that one size does not fit all, then you look towards developing a communication plan that's specifically geared towards identification and development of key messages and the necessary tools to advance that need for your increase. Ideally, you're in a position to say, what is the increase for? For example, we need 180 miles of new sewer transmission lines. The current 180 miles are being used in pipes that are somewhere from 50 to 100 years old. People can visualize that. It's specific. They can get their arms around it. We need this rate increase to comply with state and federal upgrades on the treatment of our wastewater to ensure a high-quality water discharge to our oceans, our bays, and our rivers. People can make a tangible connection. You want to put in clean, reused wastewater into our bays, our oceans, because we value the cleanliness of those natural resources. Or this is being done for health and safety purposes based upon new findings from the Department of Health Services. There is a nexus and a connection, and it's something that you have specifically to communicate. Again, ideally, you're building on an existing communication program with the community. It's not the first time that they've heard from you or have heard from you in a while. And you need to recognize that it's a strategic approach, thinking about your different audiences, constituencies, ratepayers. Again, one size doesn't fit all. What will connect with a business user may be different from a homeowner versus an apartment renter versus somebody who's on a fixed income. Last week in the focus groups, we heard something of interest in that I wouldn't mind having my rates increased if I knew they could be earmarked for the projects and not for the overhead or the salaries of the people that work at the water and wastewater utility. And it reminded me of the financial requests, for example, when Hurricane Katrina came out. I remember I was very moved by that, but I personally checked the box for the Red Cross that stated all monies given would be given directly to victims, not to the operations and overhead and administration of the Red Cross. That made me feel good. That money was going exactly where I wanted it to. And there seems to be a trend in some cases where people are saying, I will agree to have my rates increased if I know they go for that specific project. Next slide, please. There are a variety of tools you can use. You want to be strategic in doing so. As listed here on the slide, informational materials, both social and traditional media. And it's important to recognize that those complement each other. We worked for a lot of municipalities that seem to be very enamored with social media, almost instead of traditional media. But depending upon your audiences, many still depend upon traditional media to receive their information. Community open houses and workshops and speakers bureaus are all ways to make a personal connection with your ratepayers. I like the idea of displays and kiosks and tours. We have used that very effectively for many of our clients, both on small and very large CIP programs. If people can see, they can connect, they can understand the complexities of these facilities, the distances that waters have to travel, the fragile nature of a pipeline that is 50 or 60 years old. So that has worked quite well, and I suggest that as an option for consideration. Quite often agencies look to or turn towards advisory or working groups, but not often with the kind of thought that's required to ensure that you have the right composition of participants, that the committee has a very defined mission statement, there is a beginning and end for their work, and ideally you've made it and designed it in such a meaningful capacity that when they opine and provide their summary of recommendations, it can be seen to show how it helps shape the decision-making process. We have used this very, very strategically and very successfully for many, many clients who are looking for that third-party advocacy and understanding of when you need to raise rates and how to best go about doing that. Next slide, please. There are a lot of very good tools that are already in place, both by AWWA and certainly by WEF. Again, underscoring that one size doesn't fit all, but it can set a framework for you in making the connection to jobs, to the economy, to health, again, to the protection of our rivers and oceans and bays. Next slide. It suggests here through The Water's Worth It, where there are ads, articles, talking points with key messages, PowerPoints already prepared for you. Again, the point here is to create that personal connection with your public. Again, trying to effectively and simply communicate that water quality for consumption and wastewater treatment, the importance of what that has and contributes and plays in our day-to-day lives. Again, the full water cycle. Next slide. Our actions and attitudes as water stewards help us make that connection with the value of water. You know, in most cases, technology is available to really meet the challenges that we face, but it's the ongoing communication and political will that's ultimately fundamental to advance a rate increase, to site a facility, to make some of these tough decisions that each of us face each day in our respective professions. I was amazed last week in these focus groups that there is such little understanding, especially in a municipality when you have a combined bill, both of sewer and water. And there's really a limited knowledge on how the sewer and water systems complement one another. And so that needs to be taken into consideration in your ongoing communication efforts, because when you try to explain why the wastewater side of the bill needs to go up, you may receive a feedback by saying, well, they just raised our water rates. Isn't that enough? They see it all as one big mush pot, and all they know is they often write one check to the utility, and more often than not, they're not really happy about it. Next slide. This is a bit dated, the examples here, but it shows how there are opportunities, and again, I would recommend testing this in your research to show the value comparisons. In this slide, it shows with other daily products how the value of water itself can be compared to a Starbucks coffee or a gallon of gas or a gallon of milk. Next slide. You can also consider, too, making comparisons to other kinds of expenses that you incur on a daily basis, whether it's other public utility expenses and or other water and wastewater rates in cities within a greater jurisdiction of where you live. Sometimes that can advance your cause, sometimes that works against your cause. Again, I mentioned before, if you can, describing the components of your rate increase can be very helpful. Of this $1 billion, we are looking at spending $150 million on X number of miles of pipelines, again, that were installed into our system nearly 100 years ago. We are looking at upgrading X number of pump stations to ensure that the wastewater can be transported from this location to that location. The specificity gives people a comfort level that the money is being used wisely, that there's an accountability, and that there is a nexus to their rate increase. Jargon is pervasive in this industry, and even when we believe we're speaking in a much more simplistic manner, I can assure you quite often we are speaking right straight through the hearts and minds and comprehension of our ratepayers. In focus groups last week, when we had simplified the language, we were still insistent on testing the triple bottom line analysis, which everybody thought that that was a fancy, bureaucratic, jargonistic term, and the reactions were very, very negative to that sort of descriptor. Using terminology like the structural integrity of our facilities. That makes sense to us. Again, we want to connect with the ratepayer, and they don't think about our systems more often than not in terms of structural integrity. We need to also show examples of the value of your agency and make sure your internal story works well. If you promised 2 years ago that you weren't going to raise rates, you better be prepared for some pushback if you break that promise. You better be prepared to know how much you are spending on administration, what kind of perks may be available to board members and or senior management, because ratepayers across America are mad about these issues, and the probability of you hearing about that is great. Next, please. Explain the drivers of the cost of the full cycle of water. Again, it's hard for people, especially when you pay your utility bill to one agency, to really understand that separation of church and state, or separation of clean water and dirty water. It also can be very confusing because as an industry, we use so many terminologies: water, wastewater, sewer, watershed, recycle, reclaim, reuse, sludge, biosolids. The connection of understanding how this fits into their life, where they fit into this equation is really, really important. So the more you can simplify so your ratepayer and voters understand how this applies to them and what's in it for them, the higher your chance of success. Again, I mentioned considerations for other household costs, cable, power, but you also need to be careful in that making those comparisons, you might be comparing to a utility that they really, really detest. So trying to make them feel better that their wastewater and water bill is less than their power and electric bill may not be a good strategy. So you need to be prepared for some pushback. You need to prepare with your presentations to practice empathy and recognize that it's important not to take this personally, that you need to put yourself in their shoes when in fact they raise cause for concern. Next slide, please. Communicating, we want to get the story out to elected officials, which you'll be hearing another subsequent discussion about. Again, very robust mailing list to frequently communicate with people, both electronically and even in hard copy. Looking for regular updates, not just when you want something. Your ratepayers really should be an extension of your team, your water and wastewater team. And inform them, engage them, empower them, so when you need them, they can better understand why and how these investments will be made, and that there is good value in what you're asking for. Again, when you hold events, don't hold them just to say you're holding a town hall meeting. They really have to have a purpose. Ideally, you can have them neutrally facilitated, and you can design them in such a manner that people left feeling more informed and ideally less frustrated. I mentioned the conducting of tours. I believe that to be a great technique. I understand it's resource intensive, but boy, those folks when they leave feel much more empowered, much more illuminated, have a much greater understanding of the complexities and challenges that wastewater utility providers have to face each day. Next slide. Two quick examples here. One is a water example. A few years ago, a small community outside of Denver recognized the need to raise their water and sewer rates to address both the need for production of new water, making water supplies, given that what they were facing was an unreliable supply, inefficiencies, and future costs. So after a great board debate, they decided right during the winter holiday break to raise their rates 28% on the water and sewer side, as well as increase tap fees. And this was the first rate increase that had incurred in 3 years. Needless to say, it was met with tremendous criticism and pushback, and a petition immediately began circulating for a recall of 4 of the 5 board members, the 4 board members who had voted for this water rate and sewer rate increase. And so in very short order, the agency determined that they needed to take a step back and perhaps do a do-over. So they decided to delay the increase with 3 provisions. One was to hire a consultant and conduct a formal rate and tap fee study, because the prior rate increase of 28% had been done internally by staff, and the validity of it was not trusted by the ratepayers, number one. Number two, they agreed to form a community working group that would work very intimately with the rate and fee study consultant, and the committee itself was constituted by people that had not only an open mind, but some that were even vocal opponents, because we recognized that this could not be a rubber stamp, but it really had to have a broad-based constituency representing businesses and ratepayers and fixed income and activists. And then finally, during this time, it was imperative that the agency step back and really conduct a very aggressive education campaign as to why they were even considering or entertaining this kind of rate increase. So key messages were developed, a whole new website was launched, information materials, a lot of effort with the media, an advertorial series. We looked at the ability to conduct tours both on the water and wastewater side and where new proposed facilities were, and in the dead of winter conducted dozens of tours on buses while it was snowing to take people to different places and show them where facilities needed to be improved, could be built. And so through that process, over a period of about 6 months, it went from a demand for a recall to the recall failing and the rate increase being readjusted and phased and packaged in a different capacity, but ultimately supported by the ratepayers of that community. So it took a do-over to do it right. Next study, please. Next. I mentioned that we used ads, we used mailers, media relations, and noted that the recall failed. A new rate structure was accepted by the community, and they are advancing with different priorities and at a different pace what they previously discussed. Next slide. One more sample. In 2006, El Paso experienced disastrous floods, and the city of El Paso at the time was in charge of their stormwater management. Over a 3-year period, nothing was done to do any improvements, maintenance, operations on stormwater. So the city itself decided to transfer over the responsibility of stormwater to the El Paso water utilities that currently was handling water and wastewater, and do it under that organization. El Paso water utilities examined the circumstances, recognized there was a desperate need for additional revenue and investments, and with limited consultation levied a fee that in short order they received tremendous pushback, tremendous feedback from both businesses and residential interests that the fee was not sustainable and that they needed to be educated and have a dialogue about it. In fact, a petition drive in El Paso was launched to return the stormwater back to the city, basically because the city hadn't done anything and nobody wanted to pay the fee. And the political pressures on both the mayor and city council were extremely intense. So here again, the agency wisely put everything on hold and agreed to conduct a stormwater master plan. And through that process, agreed to organize a neutrally facilitated advisory committee with over 30 different types of stakeholders that helped the utility to establish a list of community values and made recommendations on stormwater priorities and programs. In that case, we did extensive research to test messages with focus groups and identify the kind of information that the residents felt they need before they could support any sort of fee increase. A tremendous amount of effort went into the development of fact sheets, of materials, really looking at before and after visuals, what happened before the storms, during the storms, and if we could make the investment in modern methods of diverting rainwater with infrastructure and technology, the improvements they would have as a community. Again, I mentioned tours. In this case, not only did we conduct dozens of tours, but we established a virtual tour on their website, and we used extensive outreach and education to drive people to the website so they could understand the complexity of the stormwater. So the good news here is that the Community Advisory Committee ultimately supported the priority projects identified in the master plan. And on May 9th, 2009, the voters of El Paso voiced their support for the El Paso water utilities to retain the stormwater system with over 65% approval rating. The mayor and city council were able to keep their seats, and they did not inherit the stormwater responsibilities back to the city. And what we did was we validated that significant work that had been achieved and ultimately communicated, and that's what was required to make those investments in the stormwater. Next slide. Again, what I've tried to underscore here is that there are ways to advance rate increases, but there is a real communications and strategic strategy in doing so. You need to look at fair and logical rate structures and be able to articulate them. Obviously, you need to recover the revenue that you need, but you need to have a defensible dialogue and discussion on why you need that revenue and what you're doing with the current monies that you already receive. We need to understand that people are embracing the mantra of conservation, but what that does ultimately is bring your agency less revenue. Many agencies are now looking at water budget rates. It can be complicated at the beginning, but once you have the kind of dialogue and engagement and education with your constituents, I have seen municipalities succeed in doing so. You need to actively communicate your benefits as an agency year-round. Again, too often we only go to our ratepayers when we want something. So it's not about when you want something, it's about doing it all the time. Build on your existing communications, constantly communicate about the value of water and wastewater, and know your community. One size does not fit all. Help reshape and change the conversation and the debate and dialogue to the investments and the return on investment. And again, know your key messages and tell them over and over and over. It's a very crowded communication world that we live in. Each of us are communicated to on hundreds of items and subjects and topics each day. And so we have to fight that communication noise and platform and make sure that when we have an opportunity, our messages are consistent, are effective, and are crisp and memorable. And on that note, I thank you, and I will turn it back over to Betty.
Thank you, Sarah. Very, very interesting and timely. Time for a couple of questions before we go on to Fiona's presentation. Sarah, can you give us an example in which you use social media to get your message out, and how do you get people's attention? As you just mentioned, there are so much clamoring for our attention. How do you make yours stand out?
Well, again, we use social media to complement a very robust communication platform. I can't think of any circumstances right now where social media drives it, but again, it does complement it. Instead of a rate example, I'll give a construction example because you have a very defined geographic area. And we do this very effectively for the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, where we're working on their $4.6 billion CIP for water, and now rolling into what looks like might be a multi-billion-dollar effort on their wastewater side. But the construction impacts have been significant, so we have worked very diligently to try to obtain emails of all of the impacted audiences, both from the physical impacts, but also the organizational groups that follow these issues, the policymakers that certainly have a concern about it, and also the media. And so we send out frequent communication updates. We send out constant contact email blasts. We send out links to news coverage. We send out links to other forms of communications, whether it be a radio ad or a television ad or television coverage that's associated with the program, again, to show this sort of holistic package of what tearing up your street really means. In this case, we're importing water from hundreds of miles away. We are doing it to be earthquake sound. We are crossing active faults. We recognize this is an inconvenience for you, but this is what's being done. This is how your monies are being invested, and this is what we're doing to minimize those inconveniences. So we are using all other forms of media and communication and outreach to complement this, but in this case, we were able to use social media in a very strategic kind of surgical strike because we worked very hard to develop very robust databases on how to contact people electronically.
Okay, thank you. One of the things we all fight for in this industry is credibility with our public. And one of the things you emphasized was the need for credibility. And we say that we're not going to raise rates and then we turn around and actually have to raise rates. How do you move through that change in direction and change in your earlier message?
My first response is it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and presentations, and interviews, and one-on-one meetings to help change a perception that exists and to create that necessary trust. One of my colleagues has coined the terminology a reservoir of goodwill. You need to be feeding that reservoir consistently because there are going to be times where mistakes happen, that things don't go the way you planned, and you're going to have to fall back on that reservoir of goodwill and the trust that you've built up. I have one specific example to share, and it was with the city of San Diego. For many years, the water side of the equation was on the back burner because wastewater was at the forefront based upon the compliance of the Clean Water Program. The water department had gone to the city council 11 times in 10 years, I believe that was the ratio, and asked for a water rate increase and was rejected 11 times. And basically the mayor's office pulled the utility director aside and said, look, there's not good credibility, there's not trust, people will not support this. You need to go out and make your case. And so the city very wisely put together a comprehensive multidisciplinary team. We did all of our homework, we did our research, we did our focus groups, and we saw that we had a tall hill to climb. And an assistant city manager in a period of 1 year made over 150 presentations. There wasn't a Rotary Club in the region that he didn't go to if we could get him in. So we did a very robust effort. We also looked at, and we kind of did it like a political campaign. There were 8 city council districts at the time, and we tailored our messages to say, a rate increase for the city of San Diego would mean in this community you would receive a new pump station at 65th Street and Herrick. So we tailored it with the thought of WIFM, what's in it for me? I don't care if you're going to build a treatment plant 15 miles away, that doesn't benefit me. So we really did a very grassroots communications approach. We looked at every city council district. We identified every maintenance opportunity, every facility opportunity, every project enhancement that could take place there. And we looked at every means to go out and talk about it at local community groups, in presentations, in local community newspapers, with the policymakers, until we were able to, over a 16-month period, build up and turn around that kind of credibility that was necessary. And when the rate increase finally went down, I'll never forget this, the headline on the editorial page of the major daily newspaper said, "A victory for our infrastructure." So we had gone from, in 18 months, 11 turndowns by the City Council for a rate increase to an editorial headline of a victory for our infrastructure. And that's because we spent 18 months almost going door to door and communicating our story. We took around pieces of cast iron pipe that showed the decrepit state that much of our water was being transported through. And boy, that visual really hit home. You had people saying, I don't want my family drinking that water, so we had to be careful there wasn't a backlash, and we explained the treatment aspects. But it really visually underscored the fragility of our system and the overriding need to invest in it. And then we had to be very strategic in the percent rate increase and show how those monies were going to be expended. And we had them prioritized based upon emergency circumstances, health and safety, standard maintenance, and deferred maintenance, so people could see how we were checking off the multi-billion-dollar series of needs when we knew our rate increases weren't going to be able to cover that much.
Wow, great information for all of us. I'm sure there are a number in the audience that are thinking, been there, wish I'd done that. But anyway, that is a great note to move on to our next presenter. Now that we've learned some strategies for communicating about rates to the public, we're going to learn how to address another constituency, the elected officials and appointed officials. There's no one better than our next speaker to talk to us about how to communicate with this constituency. Our next speaker is Fiona Allen. Fiona is a graduate of Texas A&M University, and I can hear the whoops now, with a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering. She joined the Trinity River Authority of Texas in March of 2011 as the Northern Regional Manager, where she is responsible for water and wastewater services to 1.4 million people in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. The Northern Region facilities providing these services include 5 wastewater treatment plants ranging from 3 MGD to 164 MGD, all the associated collection systems, 3 TRA-sponsored U.S. Army Corps of Engineers reservoirs, and an 87 MGD water treatment plant. Prior to her current responsibilities, Ms. Allen served in various roles with the City of Arlington, Texas, including Deputy City Manager of Capital Investment and Deputy City Manager of Economic Development, and she retired from the City of Arlington in February of 2011. Ms. Allen holds licenses as a professional engineer and registered sanitarian, as well as a TCEQ Class B distribution operator and Class 3 wastewater system operator licenses. She is a member of the Texas A&M University and University of Texas at Arlington Civil Engineering Advisory Council, the American Water Works Association, the Texas Water Conservation Association, and the American Society of Civil Engineers. And she has served as a board member of the Texas Municipal League, is past president of the Texas Municipal Utilities Association, and a former chairman of the Texas Water Utilities North Central Texas Regional School. She comes to us well tonight to share with us how do you communicate to elected and appointed officials. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you very much, Betty. And I'm also a very proud member of WEF, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to be here to talk today about two entities and experiences with rate increases. City of Arlington, Texas, at the time of our study will be around 2005, and then I'll also be talking about the Trinity River Authority, where I currently am housed. City of Arlington, Texas currently has over 340,000 residents, and at the time of this particular situation had a little over 250,000 in population. At the time there was 85,000 accounts. It's now over 100,000 accounts. The fiscal year for the city is October 1st through September 30th. Arlington operates 2 water treatment facilities, and their wastewater treatment is regionally supplied by the Trinity River Authority of Texas. The City of Arlington is a council manager form of government, but they do have an elected body. The Arlington City Council has 9 elected members. They each serve 2-year terms, and the terms are staggered. So you'll have 4 council members and the mayor elected 1 year in May, and then you'll have 4 council members in the following year. So you never have a complete turnover in your council. And quite frankly, there's a very low turnover rate. People tend to stay on the council for long periods of time. And elections in Arlington are nonpartisan. Setting the stage for this particular situation, the City Council at the time did not want to raise any water or wastewater rates despite increases from the wholesale providers, and those increases were to be absorbed through other budget reductions. The previous summer had been very dry, and the Council ordered the department to refund all budgeted revenues after the closing of books. This was several $million, and basically they said you need to give it back to the ratepayers. Late September, it starts to rain, and it continues to rain. Water sales for the department are down dramatically. Sewage treatment costs increases, flows to the Trinity River's wastewater plant were much higher than budgeted. And at the end of the first quarter, due to the increased costs for wastewater and some unexpected emergency repairs, it was obvious that revenues were not going to cover our costs, and we were having to go into reserves. Why did this happen? In looking at the rate structure, we realized it was imbalanced. We had water funds subsidizing wastewater, commercial customers were heavily subsidizing residential customers, and fixed monthly fees were not adequately funding our fixed costs. We were looking at a trend that would continually require us to raise water and sewer rates without a real foundation as to what the rates were paying for. In other words, water wasn't paying for water, it was paying for other things. And so we need to find a way to get that fixed. We also had an immediate problem because we were bleeding due to the wastewater cost increases, and we went to the council and requested immediate change in our sewer fees to pass through the increased treatment costs. We met with all the council members individually and showed them exactly what was underway. And we gave them the political opportunity to pass on the blame to others. Our wholesale provider is increasing the rates. We tried to absorb it in the budget, but some things have happened, and now we have to pass it on to our customers, was the story that the council members could tell to their constituents. We did receive an approval for a rate adjustment mid-year, and like I said, that helped stop the wastewater shortfall for the remainder of that fiscal year. So in looking at what had happened and the volatility of the revenue stream, we knew we needed to balance the revenue streams to reflect the cost of services provided. So how are we going to do this? At the time in Texas, the Texas Water Development Board had been charged by the state legislature to lead a task force to create best management practices for water conservation. One of the BMPs that was being introduced was the inclined block rate structure. The more you use, the higher the unit cost becomes. Next slide, please. So as a staff, we began to investigate incline block rate structures, and the creation of residential and commercial class rates. On the wastewater side, we needed to charge rates that would cover our costs for wastewater treatment and collection because it wasn't doing that at the time. We also needed to revise our fixed monthly costs for water and wastewater. One of the things that was being done at the time in the fixed monthly fee was the first 2,000 gallons of water consumption and the first 2,000 gallons of wastewater consumption, they were included in your fixed cost. We made the decision to remove those from the fixed cost because we wanted all our customers to be accountable and understand how much water and or wastewater they were really using. Now, we had a lot of balls that we were juggling in the air, trying to balance all these things out, looking at different classes. The bottom line was we had to try to communicate this to city management. And we were looking at huge increases in the fixed monthly costs for water and wastewater because we were trying to recoup charges for a fewer number of accounts, and that was yielding $12 a month increase to our customers at the time. We were looking at a small decrease in the average residential customer usage because the subsidy from the water usage to go to fixed fee was being reduced. Therefore, the unit cost was going down on the water side. However, if you were a residential customer and you were a big water user, your bill was going up. We were also seeing an increase in wastewater costs because we were trying again to get rid of the subsidy from the water rates and have wastewater pay for what the true cost of treatment and collection were, and that was increasing. So the bottom line was there were going to be increases to customers. We had to work with city management. They understood the issue. They didn't like the issue, and they helped us get prepared to approach the city council. So as always happens in city government, you get everything teed up, and you get everything ready to talk to your council, and what happens? You have an election. Now, I did say Arlington's council was relatively stable, and it is. What happened this time was a bit of an anomaly. We ended up with a new mayor and 4 new council members, and the mayor was previously a one-term council member, so 5 out of the 9 council members were relatively new. So we had to go back and rework our strategy to deal with the new folks on the council. So we looked at several options: abandoning the change of the cost of service model and just do nothing and continue the way we'd always done it, keeping the same rate structure but adding inclining rate blocks, or go for the cost of service change with or without inclining rate blocks. We decided to eat this elephant one bite at a time because it was so complicated. And so we initially focused on inclining rate blocks, since that was now being pushed out as the best management practice by the Water Development Board. And we wanted to continue to focus on the quality of the water and wastewater services being received. The city does citizen surveys every 2 years, and the water department always ranked right behind the fire department as being one of the best departments of the city. So we went to our council committee, which at the time was the Wastewater and Garbage Committee, which every council member wanted to be on. And they said it was a little too confusing and costly to our customers what we were proposing. However, we still had majority support and received direction to continue to explore a change in the billing methodology. So based on the feedback that we received from our council, we were looking to rework our strategy. How are we going to communicate our rate structure? And we knew we would need lots of opportunities to talk with council members about it. So we met individually with the mayor and 7 council members on multiple occasions. We had one council member who didn't want to discuss it. This was not his issue. It was not his passion. He wasn't engaged. We did provide him lots of written information, but he really didn't want to meet with us. But we walked through the remainder of them with why we needed the change, and we talked to them about several issues. Rate stability. They'd seen a year where we had a large amount of unbudgeted revenue, and then the following year we're dipping into reserves. We were very concerned about the volatility of our revenue stream and how that might impact our bond rating. We also wanted to make sure that they recognized we were committed to service delivery to our customers, and we wanted to continue the excellent track record that we had, but we needed to make sure that the revenue stream was stable enough to continue that. We showed them the impact on the revenues and department operations by laying out in front of them comparison spreadsheets and walked them through each calculation so they could see what was happening now, what would happen if we went to a cost of service methodology, and what would happen if we put in new block rates. And then we calculated their bill based on each type of methodology so they could see how it would impact them, to give them an idea of how it would impact normal citizens. We listened to their feedback and their concerns, and that was very key because we ended up doing some things based on their suggestions. We created the LOL class, and the LOL stands for Little Old Lady. One of the concerns a couple of the council members had was you're taking out the first 2,000 gallons and you're suddenly going to charge these people for that they've normally been paid in their fixed fee, and you're going to raise the fixed fee as well. What happens to those people who are minimal users who maybe potentially are going to be impacted more than somebody who's a large user? Well, to do that, we created this rate where they would get a reduced fixed fee if their average usage was less than 2,000 gallons for water and 2,000 gallons for wastewater. And at the time, this was less than 1.5% of the customer class, so it wasn't a big financial hit to the revenue plan. However, since then, this has encouraged a lot more people to do a lot more conserve water so they can actually get a reduced fixed fee and a pretty good reduction on their water bill if they can stay under 2,000 gallons a month. They also realized the transition needed to be made, but they were concerned about the big hits year to year. And while we had come up with a 3-year plan, they asked us to go back and look at a 5-year transition plan. The big change there would be the gradual increase in fixed fees. We would be biting off 20% at a time. So initially, we were only covering 20% of the fixed cost in the fixed fees. The following year would be 40% of the fixed cost in the fixed fees, and so on until we got the transition done. And then we were asked to develop this plan with and without the inclining block rate structure. We continued to work on these suggestions for the council, but we had a deadline looming. We had some to-dos. First of all, we needed to reprogram our billing system to be able to handle any changes that the council authorized. We had discussed this program with the council, not only individually, but we had 2 public work sessions and continued other public discussion. What was interesting about all this process is we had very little concern from the public. We don't know if this was apathy or satisfaction with service. But council members weren't, all this was out in the open, out in the public, in the newspaper. There was not a lot of public feedback or public opposition to what we were doing. The council started trying not to make a decision. They wanted more and more information and more time to consider the options. And for them, the timing wasn't great. This new group of individuals had been elected in May, been seated in their positions at the end of May, and we were now at the end of July, the beginning of August, asking them to make a wholesale change to the water department's revenue stream. And they were getting a little nervous. But we finally hit the deadline where we needed time to put this billing system reprogramming in place, and we asked the council to make a decision. And they subsequently did. They agreed to implement a 5-year cost of service transition plan with the inclining block rate structures. One council member wanted to do cost of service, but they didn't want the inclining block rates, and 2 council members wanted the block rates, but they wanted the same methodology used to calculate people's bill, and then we had the 1 council member who didn't want to do anything. But it's nice to get that vote of confidence in a work session. We still need to have formal ordinance approval, and Arlington requires 2 public readings on their ordinances. Again, we had no public opposition organized to do this, and by the 2nd reading, the council approved this new cost of service transition and the rates, a vote of 7-2. This is considered a great department success. It is still the basis that's used for billing today. It's helped shave off the peaks of the dry years and helped save the revenue loss or the reduction in revenue streams for the wet years, and has really flattened out their revenue to continue to make the department successful. So what have we learned in this particular case? For this one, it was slow and steady wins the race. Again, you've all heard of KISS. We kept it very simple. We boiled it down to making sure people are just paying their fair share to have high water quality, and we want to make sure all our wholesale customers are paid for their services. One interesting thing that also happened was the council changed the financial policies of the department to allow direct pass-through of wholesale rate increases to the customers, so there will never be a time where those rates are having to be absorbed or other budget cuts. The other thing is face time is key, especially if you have new board members or new council members. That's really the only way you're going to establish trust. Some get elected on a platform, and their platform may be contrary to what you're trying to do. But if you can get them in a one-on-one and just keep repeating the story and keep repeating the facts, and when they have something that they want you to do, provide them that information and listen. You can establish trust. You may not agree, but you can establish trust. And now I'll talk about the second case, which is my current employer, which is the Trinity River Authority. Let's set the scene here at the TRA. We have a 17,000 square mile area governed by our authority. We're a quasi-governmental agency established by the state of Texas. Our 25 board members represent each county in our area. We go from the North Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And the slide you see here denotes our largest wastewater treatment system. Here in the northern region, as Betty mentioned earlier, we have 5 wastewater treatment systems, and our average daily flows right now are running anywhere from 1.5 MGD at our Mountain Creek facility to around 135 to 138 MGD at our central regional wastewater system. We have the Tarrant County Water Supply Project, which is rated at 87 MGD. We also have 2 small non-operating systems in Dallas County. Just to give you an idea of where we're located, the map here will show freeway loops on the right is Dallas, and the freeway loop that you see on the left is Fort Worth. We're sort of in the middle, and you can see each one of those areas outlines each of our regional wastewater systems. And the crosshatched area represents the water service area for our Tarrant County Water Supply Project. So how does TRA talk to our customer cities? Each one of our wastewater systems or water systems has an advisory committee. We have formal bylaws with officers for the committees. Each contracting party has a voting member or alternate. Most committee members are senior staff from their cities. We do have elected officials who come and represent their cities. And we actually have a committee chair as a former mayor of one of the cities. These committees review all our budget information and are apprised of any rate increases that might be needed. We have several challenges involved in communicating with our customers. First of all is our customers are on an October 1st fiscal year, which makes budget preparation for TRA challenging because we are on a December 1st through November 30th fiscal year. So we're actually doing budget much earlier in our fiscal year than our customers are, trying to be ready to help them go October 1st or whenever they need to set their rates. Chemicals, power, insurance costs, volatile increases, and not only insurance, but any type of cost related to operating our facilities. We've all seen that across the country, and while we've got many cities who understand that, we especially have problems with our chemical costs and with security costs associated with our facilities to meet Homeland Security requirements. We all know that there's changing regulatory requirements, whether it be nutrient removal, side stream issues, you name it. And reuse has also become a big player up here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area now, and your discharge requirements relative to reuse are playing into your treatment processes. Our customer fiscal positions have been huge. As has been seen all over the country, municipalities have been struggling with lower sales tax revenues, property tax revenues, state funding. And we've here seen layoffs, furloughs, benefit reductions, no compensation increases, pay cuts in some instances. So with increasing pressure on our budget, we needed to be mindful of those who've been paying our bill. Also, flow reduction. We've seen a trend of reduction in flow. It's slight, and we're crediting it to passive conservation measures such as low-flow toilets, and as well as our cities working on their infrastructure to reduce inflow and infiltration. However, since we bill on flow amounts, higher costs divided by lower flow amounts yields a higher unit cost. And finally, there's new leadership here at the authority. We have a new general manager, and I'm also new to the organization. Our predecessors had both been in the positions that the general manager and I occupy for over 30 years. So there are some changes that were going to need to be made, and it was important to establish new schedules, and for me personally to go and do some reconnaissance with our customer cities to do a pulse check. My challenge was to get out to all the customers, and I went to their place of business because normally they come to our place of business for advisories, but I needed to go out and see what was going on in their neighborhood and find out from them, what do you think your budget looks like? What do you need from TRA? What are your expectations of the authority? And do you have any concerns about the service that you've been receiving? Using that as input and also making sure they understood our budget philosophies and strategies was a great way for me to introduce myself to them and also give them the feeling that although my predecessor had been here a long while, they knew him, they trusted him, that me coming in wasn't going to change a lot of stuff, and TRA was still going to be here to provide service as it always had. One of the issues that we faced in preparing our current fiscal year budget is it was made very clear by our board of directors that they wanted compensation increases included in our packet. And this had to be communicated to our customers since they'd be funding those increases. That was interesting in doing that because there were several cities, again, they were not getting raises. TRA had not had any compensation increase for over 3 years, and most of the cities in North Texas hadn't done anything in at least that amount of time. The feedback we got was, we wish we could. We understand why you're doing it. We don't like that you get to do it and we don't, but we're not going to stop you from doing it. We actually looked at a 3% compensation increase as maximum. So we've got a variety of raises up to that point. But they needed to know that we understood their situation, and while our board wanted it, if there was vehement objection, which there wasn't, that we would back down on that. And fortunately, we got support from all our customer cities and advisories. Again, we've got the increased costs needed to operate our system. There had been quite a few capital expenditures, equipment specifically, such as pumps or trucks. Actually, we have a train loader as well that had been delayed in purchasing, trying to save money and be mindful of what was happening in the cities. But we were getting to the point where we had some operational issues that were being caused by downtime for some of this equipment. We really needed to get it replaced. We also had to deal with additional debt issuance for authorized improvements. The Texas Water Development Board acts as our conduit for SRF funding, and we had some loan commitments sitting out there for several of our wastewater systems. We needed to go ahead and get those loans closed and get the debt issued and get the project started, or we were going to lose the loan commitments. And subsequently, we actually ended up losing some loan commitments after going back and reworking our capital program to make sure that we weren't going to overburden our new rates with debt. And then for our water customers, the raw water supplier, the Tarrant Regional Water District, is partnering with Dallas Water Utilities to build a new pipeline from East Texas that's going to cost over $1 billion. And the first set of bonds had been issued, so there was a sizable increase in raw water that we had to pass through to our water customers. So we needed to communicate that to them as well. So authority staff met with all our customer entities, and we meet with them twice to just discuss budget. And we actually have an additional meeting at our central regional wastewater system for any of those member cities' financial staff. We have 21 customers we have 20 cities and the DFW airport as customers to our central regional system. Our budget there is around $90 million, and it can get a little complicated. So we actually do end up doing 3 budget meetings at that system. Basically, they all want to know what we're going to charge and why we are going to charge it. And in each case this year, we had increasing costs, and we were looking at decreasing flows. So the commodity charges, as a result, were going up. We have detailed line item calculations for our customers to review and hopefully endorse, which they did for this current fiscal year. These budget items are then taken to our board of directors for their consideration, and they always want to know, what do your advisories think of this? And we provide them that information. As Sarah noted, communication is the key. Set expectations. Again, we meet with our advisories to talk about budget twice, but we also have another meeting with them earlier in the calendar year, and it's what we call the first quarter check on how we're doing, and we give them a capital program update. This way our customers are informed as to what we're currently doing and what we will be doing, and it sets that expectation for the authority, and we're going to be held accountable to our customers. We also want to be able to assist our customers in answering the question, why? Why are you raising our rates? How can we help their political folks communicate it out? What is the holistic answer to why? And we are available to meet with any citizen group, homeowner group, city staff, or council to help those folks answer their critics. As Sarah alluded to earlier, I've personally been out to homeowners association meetings, I've been out to city councils, and I've been out to council work sessions to tell them about TRA, to tell our story. And what's very interesting, as she noted, you get a whole different change of attitude once they hear your story. Usually 99 out of 100 times, there's one person that won't change their mind no matter what. All our wastewater plants are platinum award winners, and our customers want us to maintain that record, and they understand it takes effort and money to do that, and they've been very supportive of TRA's commitment to maintaining our platinum level awards. The other thing we want to be sure that you know, and Sarah alluded on this earlier, is make sure when you're communicating, you're putting in a consumer context. Again, $3.50, $4 for gasoline, that's about the same amount as it's going to treat 1,000 gallons of wastewater or buy 1,000 gallons of water. Make sure when you communicate with your non-industry folks, you keep it that simple, because we in the industry have a tendency to get lost in acronyms and techno-speak. Well, I can go to my public works directors or utility directors on my advisories, and we can talk about MDLs, or we could talk about TOCs. The public doesn't know what that is or why we need to be worried about it, and so you need to be very careful when you craft your message. I'll also want one word of advice: be mindful of your customers' budget woes. If your customers are furloughing or laying off employees, it isn't a good idea to propose a 5% pay raise. We know of other wholesale entities in this area have done this, and they critically hurt their relationship with their customers. And finally, I love this statement: you can't control statements that others make, but you can control your own. Consistent messaging, be credible, and you won't need to use the wastewater industry's favorite 4-letter word. Thank you for letting me share this information, and I'll turn it back to Betty.
Thank you, Fiona. Fantastic information for all of us. I guess if we were a realty presentation, the answer would be location, location, location. But since we're in the water and wastewater industry, the answer seems to be information, information, information. FaceTime, FaceTime, FaceTime. Being honest with our customers, letting them know what and why, and just counting on the fact that when presented with the appropriate information, most people, there's always the ones Fiona alluded to, will make the right decision. And we just have to count on that. We have had fantastic presentations. We've got some questions now. I'll start with a question for Sarah. Sarah, you spoke of tours and virtual tours of facilities, and one of our listeners asked, how do you reconcile the concerns for security with open public access to the facility?
Well, each agency is very different, and fortunately, we have not encountered any individual circumstances and/or orchestrated circumstances where that issue has been raised and has been significantly problematic. I will acknowledge that some municipalities have gotten far more reluctant or conservative to do so, but in some cases we do, there are security guards there. They have to have identification, and we have to have proper access to phone numbers and emails and addresses. But we haven't encountered where we've done any sort of metal detectors or screen checks or anything like that. I guess thus far we've been quite fortunate. In some cases, we have pulled outside of a facility, and then we have somebody come out, and bring different boards and different handouts. But most of the cases thus far, we are still having municipalities that are working with us, recognizing that it's in their best interest to do so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Question for Fiona. Fiona, what cost components did you include in your fixed monthly fee, billing, meter costs, some peak demand costs, others?
Arlington doesn't have any peak demand costs that are associated with their water system or the wastewater system. However, what we included generally in fixed costs were, for example, we put our debt service into our fixed cost, and the reason that we did that is whether the shower was on or not, you still had to pay your debt. We put in the cost for our customer service call center into fixed costs. Again, if you're not running the tap or flushing the toilet, there are people that are still going to call, and we still have to make payment processing. So costs such as that. We also included some of our overheads, such as our financial services group. We also included non-project specific engineers time. If we have, for maintaining our GIS system or maintaining our work management system, those type of IT folks, they were also included in the fixed cost. So that's how we allocated that. Anything related to getting the water out of the tap, such as treatment, distribution, lab, for the lab services, that was put in the water side, and then on the wastewater side it was anything to do with the collection system and the lab, that any of the small and pre-treatment, those were all included in there. We allocated the actual O&M costs and any capital costs that would not be considered part of a capital program. Hope that answers your question.
Oh, that's a great answer. Thank you. Another question is, Fiona, how do you balance the risk of losing quality employees if the public is frequently resistant to earned internal staff pay adjustments?
Well, I think one of the things that you have to do is put it in context of what is the value of having safe water and safe drinking water. I know everybody, battles with the fact that we don't like to pay our employees $1 million a year and only charge a penny for a glass of water. One of the challenges we have here, and I can only speak specifically to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, is we've got a lot of competition here locally. And if I'm not losing somebody to Dallas-Fort Worth, North Texas, Upper Trinity, they're losing somebody to me. So we kind of help balance that out. If you're in a smaller area or an area where there's not a lot of competition, I think what you need to try to make sure is people know that how important it is for your operators to be licensed, and what the qualifications are for that license and what level license you need to operate your facility, and the value of having that person and the cost to train that person. So hopefully that can help raise the, I don't want to say the esteem, but can raise awareness that these people aren't just like the guy who's down the street picking up trash. A guy who picks up trash, they're definitely needed in the system, but they probably don't have a license. They probably don't have all the qualifications, and you probably don't want a guy picking up the trash operating your water plant or your wastewater plant.
Okay, thank you. And that kind of brings us to the end of our questions. We have a few more pieces of information to impart to you before we hang up here. Next slide. One, I want to point you to the Water's Worth It website. And you see the address there, www.watersworthit.com. And there is a lot of good information here that you can use as you address the issues that we've talked about today. This is a new website, a new public awareness campaign from the Water Environment Federation, and it answers many questions about how our actions, our attitudes, and the things we most value are so closely associated with water. Some of the campaign's objectives are to demystify water and wastewater treatment by showing the direct connections between what water sector professionals do and what the public values, such as create jobs, protect health, protect the environment, and provide clean water. It creates a foundation of public awareness to support needed infrastructure investments, and it supports cutting-edge practices to deliver, recover, and reuse water resources. And you can see how each of these objectives speaks directly to where your customer's money is going and why water, and by extension water and wastewater services, is so valuable. I would encourage you to check out the campaign website to learn more and access the online toolkit. You might also use this one when your kids are having to do special projects at school, because it has incredible information about the role water plays just in the composition of our body and our health. It is really, really an interesting website. Next. And now I'm going to tell you about a new opportunity at WEF. Along with the Water's Worth It campaign, we have a new WEF Water Advocates program. And the goal here is to create a network of water professionals in every state and community and congressional district to get the word out about the value of water and the steps needed to protect it. As part of this network, if you sign up, you'll receive the training and information needed to become an effective water advocate for clean and safe water, including instructions on sending letters to elected officials and newspaper editors, giving presentations, that which everybody tends to fear, but we can make you effective. So you can give presentations to business and community organizations and conducting visits to legislative offices. We need your voice. This industry needs your voice. And so to sign up, go to the website shown. Next. And so with that, I want to thank Sarah and Fiona for their incredible presentations and sharing their experience and expertise with the group today. Thank all of you for tuning in, taking time from your busy day, and I hope you have found it very productive and will, over the next years, find it very, very effective, the things that you've learned today. A link to the recorded session will be emailed to you within the next week, and including a way to download the slides and information on obtaining the educational credits. So with that, I say goodbye and have a lovely afternoon, and I hope most of you are a lot cooler than we are here in Texas. See ya.